Round the nation, PYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here. Welcome to the show. Got a great show for you guys here today. A lot of interesting stuff. We'll talk about, of course, Donald Trump. Boise in it today. But then again, how's that different from every single day? Okay, I don't really have an answer to that question. But anyway, it's a good thing that was rhetorical. Okay, so we've got the insane cabinet rant from yesterday that we're going to talk about. We've got some video on that. Then we have Donald Trump compares impeachment to a lynching. I'm not kidding. He actually said those words on Twitter. Then we've got, of course, response to it, Republican response, Democratic response to it. And then we also have the people's response or social media. So that's fun. Then we have Bernie Sanders coming to the defense of Tulsi Gabbard. And then we've got a story on homelessness and how homelessness is essentially bringing back medieval style diseases. I mean, it's a really disastrous story. It's getting bad. But don't worry, we can actually do something about it. And I'm going to talk about a little bit how. So we'll figure it out. All right. So that's kind of the stories that we have. A bit of a breakdown here. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important to do so. Helps the show. I'll thank some patrons and do some shout outs and super chats later on after we take our first break. So there's that. But we'll start out here with the insane cabinet. Oh boy. All right. You kind of want to fix that a little bit here. I know I broke the mirage, but okay. Anyway, moving on.
George Washington, they say, had two desks. He had a presidential desk and a business desk. I don't think you people with this phony emoluments clause.
So that's Donald Trump calling the emoluments clause, or essentially the Constitution, phony. So now this is right after, by the way, after he got a lot of pressure, not from Democrats, because yes, he did get a lot of pressure from Democrats, but he didn't care about Democrats, but Republicans who could no longer defend him setting the G7 at his Doral resort. So he pulled back on that after first announcing or going out and having Mick Mulvaney announce in his disastrous press conference that they will be hosting the G7 at Trump's Miami resort. And so that didn't happen. He had to pull back. So now the question is, why didn't Republicans defend it? Right? I mean, it's a pretty good reason. The Constitution says that you cannot have foreign emoluments. In fact, here's what it says. Quote, no title of nobility should be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any of any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. That's fairly clear, right? Holding the G7 at his own resort would have actually gotten him some money. It would have helped him out. No, I promise, I'm doing it for free. Well, we don't know that because you won't actually release any sort of disclosure forms. There's zero transparency here. And so, no, we can't exactly trust for him to not make a profit off this. And even if he gave away any profit, there would still be things like management fees set up for that resort. So it gets a little complicated, but trust me, Donald Trump will usually find a way to profit. So now, remember, Doral, this would have brought in some revenue as well, even if he had essentially not made any sort of profit from it. Doral is a struggling hotel. Now, we know from financial disclosures, the ones that were actually released, I believe he stopped releasing them back in 2014. Um, though I'm not entirely 100% sure on the year, but he stopped releasing them because those financial disclosures for Durrell were awful. It was losing money. It was a struggling resort, um, and has had issues with bed bugs. Not only that, but of course, when you plan to have the G7 summit, it would be in June. June, it's incredibly hot, it's incredibly humid. That's why there are a lot of vacancies around that time. And so, I mean, there are good reasons to not stay at the Doral Resort, other than, of course, violating foreign emoluments. And again, when you have all these dignitaries from foreign countries, again, this is the G7. This is a group of seven world leaders coming in to stay at this Doral Resort, as well as their attendants, their entourage. Well, I mean, look, I think it's fairly obvious why, at least when it comes to the emoluments, why he could not host the G7 summit there. But now I want to give you more of this rant because it is fantastic. So let's take a look.
It's in the best location. I'm very good at real estate, very, very good. Much better than you even understand. When you see my financials, which I'll give at the right time, you'll say, man, he was much better than we even thought. This guy knows right here, Mnuchin, because he was in the private sector. He knows very much what I have. He would tell you. Someday maybe he'll tell you. But I'm very good at real estate. It would have been great. But the Democrats went crazy. Even though I would have done it free, saved the country a lot of money. Then they say, oh, but you'll get promotion. Who cares? You don't think I get enough promotion? I get more promotion than any human being that's ever lived. I think I get. I think I would have that. I think I can say that fairly safely. I think I get more promotion than any human being that's ever lived. Other presidents, if you look, other presidents were wealthy. Not huge wealth. George Washington was actually considered a very, very rich man at the time. But they ran their businesses. George Washington, they say, had two desks. He had a presidential desk and a business desk. I don't think you people with this phony emoluments clause.
All right, so look, those are just some highlights. Again, this went on for about 20 minutes. Jesus. So now it's kind of funny how obsessed he is with making money. It's essentially his only driving force, right? So, and the reason that I point this out is because he seems very knowledgeable on how much money the president's made. For example, George Washington, right? He knows everything about that, but not about literal history. You know, that's because the only thing he's ever been interested in is money. Looks, it appears that George Washington was like super rich. Wow, I love that. Well, okay, look, George Washington, landowner. At this point in time, only people who were wealthy white landowners had the ability to have any sort of say in government. And that's, of course, how they originally modeled the 13 colonies as well as the first 13 states in the United States after. And so, of course, that eventually changed. And people who weren't just white, wealthy landowners were able to actually be part of the political process. And so, look, Washington grew hemp. Okay. Hey, if you want to go back to that'd be fantastic. But also, back in those days, and to kind of understand why Washington and some of the earlier presidents were able to do business as well as be leaders, is because at that time, being president was not a full-time job. So you would go in, lawmakers would meet probably several times a year, or depending on whether an emergency had come up, they would leave their current job and they would go serve as their senator or their representative or a cabinet member, whatever, based on what the country actually needs. So this is kind of how it first started out. And so, yeah, it made sense that you would own a business, go back to that business after you were done legislating, and then, that's how this would work. It doesn't work anymore, right? They don't just go back to the farm after they pass a bill. And it's actually good that it doesn't work that way anymore, because the reason that we have the emoluments clause is because that there are certain businesses that would be impacted by, for example, foreign investment or other rules on corruption that would prevent you from making rules and passing laws that would benefit yourself. Okay, so now I also love how he says, well, I'm very good at real estate. No, you're not. Complete and total lie. Again, the thing that Donald Trump does is that he happens to license out his name, right? And the reason that people like to license out his name is because he's very good at marketing. He's very good at bragging. In fact, he's doing it right here. Dude, would have been the best G7 ever. You'd see it if you ever saw my financials, which I will not give you, maybe, but you probably not. But Mnuchin knows that he's good at finance. I get more promotion than any human being that has ever lived. No, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But, I mean, he is good at talking about himself. So now, this went on, going from topic to topic, again, for 20 minutes. Jesus Christ. Now, and this whole thing, of course, was supposed to be about Syria. And look, some of it was. They did have a small discussion on Syria, and that's also problematic. But here's the thing. During this meeting, he couldn't help himself. He had to go after Obama for the Netflix special, which, by the way, Obama's no longer president, so he's actually able to do business deals and actually make money and own a business because guess what? You're not president. When you're president, you should divest from your businesses. That's it. And look, if Donald Trump either resigned, which would be a great day, or was no longer in office for whatever reason, another great day, nobody would care about his businesses unless maybe he broke laws running those businesses. But let's be honest, even then, very likely that we wouldn't punish him because it doesn't happen all that often. We don't actually, hold rich people accountable for when they actually do crime. But again, Trump doesn't care because all he wants to do is make money. So that's the thing. There are rules in place right now to prevent conflicts of interest, especially when it comes to foreign powers. And that's why you have divestment. That's why Jimmy Carter had to give up his peanut farm. I know, right? Before taking power. But again, Trump doesn't care. He's in it for the money. So now there's one more thing, right? So you can tell he's pretty salty about not being able to host the G7 at Doral, right? And it's, again, not because the Democrats yelled at him. It's because Republicans refused to back him because it was incredibly difficult to defend this. In fact, I've got some quotes here from Republicans. This is Representative Mike Simpson from Idaho. He says, quote, "You have to go out to try to defend him. Well, I don't know if I can do that. I have no doubt that Doral is a really good place. I've been there, I know. But it's politically insensitive. They should have known what the kickback is going to be on this. That politically, he's doing it for his own benefit." That's a Republican saying that. Republican Jeff Duncan from South Carolina, he said this, quote, "I think the optics aren't good, but we have a lot more problems to worry about. I mean, it looks really bad, but hey, we got other problems. Look at all the other problems over there." Representative Tom Cole, Republican from Oklahoma, said of the Doral announcement, quote, "Doesn't bother me a great deal, but I think that certainly there is an appearance of a conflict of interest." Even he's like trying to admit it. He's like, "Oh, I really don't care. I do the same thing, but God, you have to be so stupid and literally make it so transparent." Now, Representative Tom Reed, who is a longtime Trump ally, by the way, he says, quote, "This is a legitimate criticism. The profit issue, that clearly has to be transparent. I would encourage those at the White House to look at the optics and appearance of this. Even the appearance of impropriety is something we need to take into consideration. I have concerns about this." So here are a bunch of Republicans saying, don't do this, don't do this. And of course, these are the people that Trump listens to because Trump has to rely on their help with impeachment. So that's the dilemma, right? They cannot defend Donald Trump on this issue and on impeachment. That's literally a bridge too far. there is a limit for Republican congressmen. Now, and that's important because they read polls, right? Now, there's a poll out there where 50% of Americans now support the impeachment and removal of the president. 43% do not support that. That is the highest ever for impeachment. I mean, these are terrible numbers. And so at the same time, though, Republicans are caught in a kind of a hard situation because you have Republican voters that say that all this is fake news, that it's all a witch hunt. They're basically parroting Donald Trump's talking points. And so they're in Trump's corner. So you have an untenable position here. And so Donald Trump finally listens to his Republican allies and says, oh, okay, I'm going to walk it back. We're not going to do it at Doral, but it would have been the best G7 ever. He's obviously very, very salty about it, right? So ironically, this is what Lindsey Graham was warning about years before he kissed Donald Trump's ring. He said, quote, if we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed, and we will deserve it. Now, look, it's playing out much differently than I think he originally meant it, than he intended. But when you look at the party, it's exactly what's happening. The Republicans continue to descend into pro-Trump madness simply because of the base. And the congressmen who are normally like, yeah, well, here's what we do. We basically dupe our base so that we can continue to get tax cuts and deregulation for ourselves, so we can make sure to take all the money. Well, now the base is whipped up into such a frenzy that they can't even really do that anymore. It's gotten to a point of where it's like, if you try to even go against the base, even if you're doing things, they want you to do things that are completely destructive to your money-making schemes, and ally with somebody who's literally going to try to crash the United States. I mean, what can you do? You're going to lose your base of support. You're going to lose your elections. You're going to lose your power. And so that's disaster. And there's literally, for them, no way out. And I would feel bad for them if they didn't get themselves into this situation in the first place. Okay. Let's move on. Now, President Trump was caught using some unfortunate language in a tweet where he fumed about impeachment. So now let me give you the tweet here. He said, so someday, if a Democrat becomes president and the Republicans win the House, even by a tiny margin, they can impeach the president without due process or fairness or any legal rights. Well, that's funny because that's already essentially happened. Remember the impeachment of Bill Clinton. But he continues, he says, and this is where the unfortunate language comes into play, quote, all Republicans must remember what they are witnessing here, a lynching. But we will win. Ooh. Oh, boy. Okay. So now, for one, it's obvious that this is not what that is, right? There's actual allegations of crime, and they're going through due process by having impeachment inquiry. Then it goes to hearings, when there's official articles of impeachment, and then those are, presented by the House, and then the Senate gets to convict. So all of that right there, by the way, that is 100% due process. So, of course, he's wrong about that. But okay. So now, and of course, the reason here that they're bringing him up on impeachment, doing impeachment inquiries, of course, he was caught pressuring a foreign leader into doing political favors for him to look into his political opponents, not just Joe Biden, but also Elizabeth Warren. What does she have to do with Ukraine? Nothing. Not to mention foreign emoluments violations, alleged. And of course, here's the thing, again, nowhere near lynching, right? Again, due process. But he uses this disgusting language. And so, of course, outrage. So let me give you some of the responses here from African American members of Congress. Representative Bobby Hills, a Democrat from Illinois, says, you think this impeachment is a lynching? What the hell is wrong with you? Do you know how many people who look like me have been lynched since the inception of this country by people who look like you? Delete this tweet. That is incredibly strong. So now, more. I've got House Majority Whip Representative James Clyburn, a Democrat from South Carolina. He said this, quote, "That is one word no president ought to apply to himself. You know, I've studied presidential history quite a bit, and I don't know if we've ever seen anything quite like this." Well, we have not. Congressional Black Caucus Chairwoman Representative Karen Bass of California tweeted this, "You're comparing a constitutional process to the prevalent and systematic brutal torture of people in this country that look like me. Every time your back is up against a wall, you throw out one of these racial bombs." More. 2020 candidate Senator Cory Booker tweeted this, "Lynching is an act of terror used to uphold white supremacy. Try again." Oh, that's really, really strong. And then, of course, you have Julian Castro, another 2020 candidate, said this, "It is beyond shameful to use the word lynching to describe being held accountable for your actions." Well, that's certainly how they feel it. Representative Hakeem Jeffries told a press conference, quote, "The president shouldn't compare a constitutionally mandated impeachment inquiry to such a dangerous and dark chapter in our history." But it's not just Democrats. There's one Republican, that Senate Majority Whip John Thune. Here's what he said. He said that Trump's comparison was, quote, "inappropriate," and added that it was not appropriate in any context. As, of course, you will, that's, I guess, the strongest that a Republican will get on this. But there's more. So now, that's one side. So let's get to the defenses, right? So now, let's start out with Senator Lindsey Graham. He said this on Capitol Hill to reporters, quote, "This is a lynching in every sense. This is un-American." Except for, it's a white guy, happens to be the most powerful man in the world, who is facing legitimate investigations, full of due process, mandated by the Constitution, which, by the way, the Constitution couldn't be more American. I mean, other than that, Lindsey Graham's totally right. More reaction. So this is Senator Tim Scott. So Tim Scott is the GOP's only African-American senator. So this is what he said, quote, "There's no question that the impeachment process is the closest thing to a political death row trial. So I get his absolute rejection of the process. But," he says, quote, "I wouldn't use the word lynching." Now, even Scott's like, no, don't use that word. Not a good word. All right. More. Representative Jim Jordan, after being asked by CNN's Manu Raju if Trump's tweet was appropriate, said this, quote, "The president's just frustrated. I mean, doesn't everybody throw out racially charged language and compare themselves to people who were literally murdered for the color of their skin every time you get frustrated? I know I do. I mean, you caught me. Come on, man." So now let me get to another one. This is Trump spokesperson Hogan Gidley on Fox News. Let's take a look.
Would the president ever consider that maybe that was a poor choice of words and maybe rephrase his wording on impeachment?
Right. And I've not spoken with him directly about the tweet. I can speak about poor choices, and that's what the media tries to do to him every single day. The president wasn't trying to compare himself to the horrific history in this country at all. What he was trying to point out clearly was that he has been attacked relentlessly by the mainstream media without cause, without evidence, since the day he took over in this office.
Clearly? Was it really that clear? I mean, come on, man. Seriously. Again, due process. There is evidence. The White House itself released the evidence of the call. You can look at that. You can read it yourself. I know it's a memo, but you also have a whistleblower report that backs that up. And so you can look at it and you can clearly see, unless you're blinded, unless you don't want to see it, unless you're got these ideological blinders on, you're going to see that this is an attempt to get a personal political favor from the leader of Ukraine and dangling military aid for Ukraine on the line. Very, very clear. But no. Without evidence, let me remind you that Republicans ran an impeachment on Bill Clinton. Again, Bill Clinton's not my favorite person here. When they couldn't find evidence of wrongdoing when it came to Whitewater, right? So there's that whole Whitewater, land deal, whatever, right? They couldn't find any evidence on that. So you know what they did? They impeached him for having an affair. And the same people who were impeaching him for having an affair were having an affair. I mean, come on. You can't really talk, man. But again, all this evidence. You even got testimony from Fiona Hill. You got Rudy Giuliani going on TV and admitting crimes. Mick Mulvaney going on TV and saying, quid pro quo. We do it all the time before walking it back. I mean, look, this is just incredibly laughable. The point is here, the president, not a victim. Definitely not a victim. And what he does by using this language, it does a disservice to the victims of actual horrific hate crimes. And it's because, for one, he doesn't get it. For two, I think he is old school racist. And again, because of that, doesn't want to get it. And he will continue to use this disastrous language. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a break. We'll come back. We've got, I'm going to first, when we get back from the break, read some super chats if we have any, or comments, and then thank some patrons, things like that. So leave your comments or super chats. I'll read them and respond to them right after the break. Stay right here, Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so let's read a couple of member comments here. Starchick says, in layman's terms, quid pro quo equals you do me a favor, I'll do you a favor after you do my favor first. That sounds a lot like how Donald Trump operates. And hey, look, in business, I guess that's fine. But when it comes to politics, not fine. And Anderson also says, lynching is not just restricted to people of color, though. It's far more prevalent. No, you're right. You are right about that. But mostly, yes, it does affect and impact people of color the most. Yeah. All right. So those are the comments here. Thank you for sending those in. Let's see. Let's do some patrons who support the show. So let me get down here to the new patrons here. I want to thank Holly Tallman, Ingor Holland, Jacob Davis, and Jake Z. So the patrons of the day. Thank you for supporting independent progressive media. If you want to join, you want to help us out, go to patreon.com/TYTNation. And then we've got some channel members as well. I want to give a shout out to and a thanks to B. Sprack, Cynthia Hills, and Dennis McPherson. So thank you to those supporters as well. Okay, so let's dive into the stories here. Let's go to Bernie Sanders defends Tulsi Gabbard. So this is interesting. Okay. First it's this and dive right in. All right. Senator Bernie Sanders has gone to the defense of fellow 2020 presidential contender Representative Tulsi Gabbard. So now on Monday, Hillary Clinton, she came back and started talking about how there's a Democratic candidate that is being groomed by the Russians. Of course. Let me give you a quote here. This was on, I think, David Plouffe's podcast. Quote, I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary, and they're grooming her to be the third-party candidate. And added, she's the favorite of the Russians. Now, there's only 4 women that are in the Democratic primary right now that are considered to be frontrunners. Well, okay, I'll take that back. Not exactly frontrunners, but one is, and that'd be Elizabeth Warren. Now, is Elizabeth Warren a Russian asset? No. And Hillary Clinton doesn't think so either. Is it, let's see, who else? Well, there is Amy Klobuchar. Is Amy Klobuchar a Russian asset? Probably not. And then there is, well, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, Russian, didn't think so. And so that leaves Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has a little bit of a history with the DNC. In fact, she quit her position and endorsed Bernie Sanders back in 2016, has been calling out DNC corruption ever since. So that must be the person, right? So now, now here's the thing about that, right? So now, is she a favorite by like Assad and stuff? Yeah, it's because her foreign policy doesn't involve doing regime change in Syria and Iran. And those are places, of course, allies of the Russians. Now, I'm also against doing regime change in Syria and Iran. So I guess that makes me Russian too. It's crazy. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not a supporter of Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's good on that issue, but again, I think there are other issues for her that I believe that she's problematic. But I'm not going to get into those, right? But at the end of the day, is Tulsi Gabbard better than Hillary Clinton on foreign policy? Absolutely. Hillary Clinton is a Democratic war hawk. So now Bernie Sanders comes to her defense in a tweet. He said this, quote, Tulsi Gabbard has put her life on the line to defend this country. People can disagree on issues, which I do, but it is outrageous for anyone to suggest that Tulsi is a foreign asset. Completely agree. 100%. So this was the right thing to do. He's absolutely right. Suggesting that one of our soldiers, and this is what I was saying before this, before he came out with his defense of Tulsi, when I was defending her on my own, is that, look, it's pretty gross when you suggest that one of our soldiers, somebody who'd served in the military, spent time in an Iraqi combat zone, would be an asset to a foreign country. I mean, come on, man. There's no evidence to support that theory. So now here's the thing, right? She cites, oh, well, there's Russian bots and trolls, and then there's, Russian media that is, highlighting Tulsi Gabbard, et cetera, right? Now, is there trolls and bots? Of course there are. Are some of them Russian? Yeah, I don't doubt it. And do some of them do misinformation and propaganda? Of course. But back in 2016, we had these same trolls. Now, these same trolls, and I know this personally, right? So some of these same trolls, maybe with different accounts, heck, maybe even different trolls. I don't know. But there were a lot of Bernie Sanders groups that were infiltrated by these bots that tried to spread their misinformation there. Now, I don't think it was all that effective because at the end of the day, about 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters went and voted for Donald Trump. So 12%. Now you might think, wow, that's a really, really high number. But think about this, right? 88% of Bernie Sanders supporters, even though she was not our pick, we sucked it up and we voted for Hillary Clinton. As much as we had to shower afterwards, right? We did that. 88%. But again, remember, if you think 12% is high, full quarter of Clinton supporters back in 2008 voted for John McCain. So now, Clinton spokesman Nick Merrill, however, he had a after some backlash, he decided he was going to pull it back. He said that Clinton was suggesting that the Republicans, not the Russians, were grooming someone to be a third-party candidate. But look, you can't. I mean, she's the favorite of the Russians, right? Look, maybe we interpreted it wrong, but that's really, really, I mean, open and very, very vague of who she's saying they are. They meaning Republicans or they meaning the Russians. But seeing as how Hillary Clinton has basically spent all of her time since 2016 saying that everybody's a Russian and that there's all of this, I don't know, Russia made me lose the election, which is not accurate. Russia did this, Russia did that. And look, did Russia do some bad things? Of course, right? Did they try to interfere in the election by using bots and trolls? Yes, I believe they did. Was there the hacks in the DNC? I believe so. Nonetheless, they are not the reason that Hillary Clinton lost. Her campaign, as I say every time I talk about 2016, was died a death of 1,000 cuts. Many of them self-inflicted. So, and even if that was an assumption, it's an untrue assumption. And I think she meant that it was the Russians. So now here's the thing, right? The other thing and one of the reasons, other than of course Bernie Sanders having incredible integrity, and of course loyalty to people who supported him as well. Because remember, Tulsi Gabbard quit the DNC when they found out that the DNC was essentially rigging the rules against Bernie Sanders back in 2016. She quit the DNC and she endorsed Bernie Sanders. I'd say that took political courage, and I give her credit to to this day, even if I don't plan on voting for her. But he's been hit ever since 2016 by that same smear. Even today, I see, mentions basically on donut Twitter and, establishment pages that Bernie Sanders is a Russian agent. He's a Russian asset. Hilarious because his policies are the very opposite of what the Russian government would want. The Russian government is deeply right-wing and deeply corrupt. Bernie Sanders is fighting to end corruption by getting money out of politics, by the way. That's one of the big things in his campaign. When he came out with that plan, I literally cheered out loud because it's an amazing plan. Again, getting the corruption out by ending the influence of not only just foreign governments, but also corporations and the wealthy on our political process. Is there any other better policy? And he would do so by, of course, instituting an amendment to the Constitution. And so, and of course, that's a difficult thing to do. And there are other measures that he, is going to try to use to end that corruption. But that's one of the big ones. That's one of the biggest parts of this plan to end corruption. Not only that, but you have, universal health care, through Medicare for all, everyone covered, no copays, deductibles, free college for everyone, protecting our elections, all this stuff. Complete opposite of right-wingers essentially everywhere. And so, I mean, when you think about it, there would be no reason for many in the Russians especially to support somebody like Bernie Sanders. And Tulsi Gabbard says that she holds also progressive positions, and I don't doubt her on at least a lot of them, right? I think I agree with Tulsi Gabbard probably by 85%. And so now, but again, you have, like I said, Bernie Sanders defending Tulsi Gabbard, and I think it's a great thing. Now, someone else also came out in favor of Tulsi Gabbard. So this is interesting. Donald Trump. Donald Trump came out and also defended Tulsi Gabbard, saying that she was not a Russian agent. So now here's the thing, right? I know Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard are not Russian agents. We know that for sure. But I also, and this is going to be controversial, I don't think Donald Trump's a Russian agent either. Now, I don't think he gets his walking orders from Putin. But I do believe he gets a lot of money. And actually, it's been shown that he has received a lot of money from the Russians. So now, for example, Don Jr. came out and said, yeah, we get all our money from Russia. They must really, really love golf. No, I don't think that's what it's for. Look, again, I don't think he takes orders from Putin. I don't think he takes orders from Russia. Donald Trump don't take orders from anybody. But I believe he has certain financial interests at stake. I also think he looks up to Putin in the same way that he looks up to Kim Jong-un, Rodrigo Duterte, Jair Bolsonaro, as well as other authoritarians. Why? Because he wants to be them. He wants to be an authoritarian. He feels a kinship. He has authoritarian tendencies. And yet when you have that, plus financial interests, plus him not being very bright, it's easy to see why Donald Trump will take the side of authoritarians, specifically, in a lot of cases, the Russians. But to say that Bernie or Tulsi do the same thing is absolutely ridiculous. I think that Hillary Clinton losing to Donald Trump in 2016, I think, like, she lost her mind. Not in a literal, oh, she's completely mentally ill part, but just in, like, now she sees Russians everywhere. And look, I don't blame her. I mean, she lost to a reality show clown that could barely speak in coherent sentences. That would drive someone crazy too. But this is her playbook. And this has some people worried that she's using this, that she's testing this on Tulsi Gabbard so that she can go after Bernie Sanders and maybe even ultimately enter the race. I don't know about that, man. I don't know. I hope not. I hope she stays out. But here we are. Instead of focusing on policy positions like Medicare for all, free college, which has, by the way, propelled Elizabeth Warren, even though she has been a bit waffly on Medicare for all, has called it a framework. So there's a couple of red flags there. But even then, she's running on, I have a plan for that. Here are the plans. Policy is incredibly important. And yet now with Clinton charging in with all the Russia stuff, now we're right back to 2016 and blaming the Russians for everything instead of, for one, actually protecting the integrity of our electoral process, which would actually deter any country, any foreign country, especially the Russians, from trying to interfere in our elections. It's just, I think it's a big distraction and a way to try to get this discussion away from incredibly popular policy. We got to get back to talking about what's important. And this smearing Russia stuff on Tulsi Gabbard, not important. Okay. All right. Set the next story. Which is disastrous. Okay. Now, there is a crisis of homelessness that's happening in America. Now, rents have continued to rise, costs of living have increases, while wages, of course, continue to remain fairly stagnant. Uh, and because of that, you have a number of people in big cities that are becoming homeless. Now, one of the many problems that goes along with homelessness is the fact that it is bringing back infectious diseases that are, um, or that have once ravaged populations in the Middle Ages. So we are literally going back to the Middle Ages here. Now, this is according to a report in the Atlantic. Los Angeles recently experienced an outbreak of something called typhus. Now, typhus is disease spread by infected fleas on rats and other animals, and this has been happening in downtown streets. People in Washington state have also been infected with, the Shigella bacteria. Now, Shigella is spread through feces and causes the diarrheal disease shigellosis, as well as Bartonella quintana or trench fever, which spreads through lice. So those are some of the diseases, and there are others, of course, like hepatitis A, which is again spread through feces, and has infected actually more than 1,000 people in Southern California in the last couple of years. Now, you also have disease outbreaks in New Mexico, Ohio, Kentucky, primarily among people who are homeless or have substance abuse problems. Now, these diseases are exacerbated by large populations of homeless people in one area without health care and have unfortunately become a public health crisis. So, now, these diseases, by the way, according to the Atlantic, have flared as the nation's homeless population has grown in the past 2 years. About 553,000 people were homeless at the end of 2018, and nearly 1/4 of homeless people live in California. And these diseases, they explain, spread quickly and widely among people living outside or even in shelters, helped along by sidewalks contaminated with human feces, crowded living conditions, weakened immune systems, and limited access to health care. So this is disastrous. One physician, Glenn Lopez, was quoted as saying, quote, "The hygiene situation in these camps is just horrendous." He continues by saying, "It becomes just like a third world environment where the human feces contaminate the areas where they're eating and sleeping." So now, if you're someone who doesn't care about homeless people, well, you might want to be concerned because, after all, this actually is your problem as well. Those infectious diseases are not limited to homeless populations. Lopez warns that even someone who believes they are protected from these infections is not. One example of that is that at least one LA city staffer contracted typhus in City Hall last fall. Now, that could be you next. Now, San Diego County, for example, their officials warned in 2017 that diners at a well-known restaurant were also at risk for hepatitis A. In fact, there were also 167 cases of typhus from January 1st, 2018 through February 1st of this year, up from 125 in 2013 and just 13 in 2008, according to the California Public Health Department. So now what happens? Well, the homeless population boomed after the financial crisis. Following decades of wage stagnation, rising rents, insane home prices, lack of health care, including mental health care, well, that's what happened. And now they're living in areas where there's too many people, and of course, garbage and feces and stuff gets everywhere. Those are the places, of course, that attract rats and of course, fleas and other animals. And there's also been a huge problem with hepatitis A in California. According to the state-run public health department, 21 people have died as a result of the 2017-2018 outbreak that had happened. But it's not just in California, of course. It happens in other places with higher homeless populations. For example, New York City. New York City has not experienced the same outbreaks of hepatitis A and typhus, but there are other problems there. Now, this is according to Kelly Doran, an emergency medicine physician and assistant professor at New York University. Doran said different infections occur in shelters, including tuberculosis. These diseases, by the way, are referred to, if you take them as a whole, typhus, hepatitis A, tuberculosis. They're basically considered to be medieval because that's what we used to see in large part back in the Middle Ages. We're not living in the Middle Ages. We're living in 2019. But yet we are having these diseases make a comeback because we have places where there are people that don't have homes and cannot get mental health care or any kind of health care. So that's, again, disastrous. In fact, people living on the streets or in homeless shelters are more vulnerable to such outbreaks. Why? Weakened immune systems that are worsened by stress, malnutrition, and sleep deprivation. Again, there are people with mental illness, substance abuse disorders that make it very hard for them to stay healthy or get health care or get homes. So that's a big problem here. Now, right now, we have more empty homes than we have homeless people. We have the most billionaires as well in this country. The richest 3 people have more wealth than the bottom half of society. So why do we have homeless people? Well, there's one simple answer: greed. Corporations and the wealthy want to keep stuff in their pockets with more money, as opposed to using money to solve the problems. Now, I'm not saying that all millionaires are the same. No, they're great people, lots of money, that actually give a lot of money to homelessness. And it's not just, Democrats that are good, Republicans that are bad. No. There are a lot of Democrats, liberals, that see the homeless problem as, well, there are homeless people here and I want them removed. Out of sight, out of mind. I did a story years ago about a Democratic politician in Hawaii that went around stealing homeless people's shopping carts and smashing them in front of them. Again, what little they own, smashed. And then, of course, you have benches that are blocked so people can't sleep on them, spikes being put up in corners so people can't sleep. This is what both sides are doing. They are ignoring homelessness completely. And look, I know. There are people that think that this is okay. No, it's great. They deserve what they get. You're poor. We should punish you more for being poor, lazy, and irresponsible. Of course, right? But I believe that in America, in the greatest country in the world, there is no reason that we cannot provide homes for homeless people and health care to everyone who needs it. We can do that. You know why? Because we are great. Healthcare and, yes, shelter is actually a human right. We should all have shelter. And of course, I know people are already going to give me a negative response because they don't care about other human beings. Well, that sucks for you. And I'd hate to be you. And again, there are people out there that think we should punish the poor for being poor. But again, doing that actually ends up punishing ourselves as well. In effect, we get these horrible diseases that make a comeback in society. And for those, again, who don't want to see homeless people around instead of solve the problem, well, look, that's their solution, right? But I think instead of dumping them off somewhere and putting spikes all over the ground and designing benches you can't sleep or sit on, and basically finding new and clever ways to be horrible, maybe we should, do something to help these people. I mean, come on. Utah did it. Utah's very conservative, but it ended up saving them money, and it actually helped these people. Giving people homes, addressing massive income and wealth disparity, boosting wages, guaranteeing healthcare, it's a no-brainer, man. It will put a huge dent in the homeless population, actually solve the issue of tent cities that burn with disease, and actually will also make our streets cleaner, safer, and do it all while doing the right thing and helping human beings. The only thing that's stopping us is greed. Are we going to be the country that's great and solves this problem? Because we can. There's nothing stopping us but us. Or, more specifically, a few people who have more anger and hate in their hearts for fellow human beings and want to see people suffer for life choices or sometimes for choices they never even made. I mean, we can do something, so let's actually do something. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all I got time for, guys. Thank you for going around the nation with me. And A weird glitch there, where I lost my screen. But okay. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Please like and share the stream. Please like and share this stream. Where you can see me screw up on my stuff even more. Subscribe to the channel. Please support us on Patreon or become a channel member. There are different ways to do that. Hit the join button below or go to patreon.com/TYDNation. You can help us out that way. I will not be here tomorrow. So I got a doctor's appointment, which is hard for somebody who doesn't have insurance, but it is what it is. So that's we'll be back on Thursday, hopefully for a great show. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you.